So, hello, good morning, and welcome, as the late great David Frost would say. My name is Rob Creer. I am the manager of the Swindon Wiltshire Growth Hub, and with me is.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura. I'm a skills advisor at the Growth Hub.
And it's a real delight for us to have you here today on our very first Wellbeing in the Workplace sort of seminar / workshop / networking opportunity. So our speakers are, Laura?
We will have an introduction to the session from Guy, who will come in and do an intro for everyone and explain his role at Wiltshire Council. And then after that, our speakers for today are Paul Fox from the Money and Pension Service and Chrissy from Able Futures. So they're the people that are going to come and talk to us about their organisations today. They can tell us about what they do, the kind of support that they offer, how to access that, and how that would be appropriate for yourselves as possible employers, employees, and ways of accessing that support that's out there. Especially at the time being, we thought that was a really important thing to let people know what sort of kind of support is out there and how to get hold of it, basically. So we think this is going to be really useful for everyone, and we hope you enjoy it and give us lots of feedback as well, even on our feedback from our microphones. Really useful. Thanks everyone for coming.
So without any further ado, let's bring Guy on screen. Excellent.
Magic.
Hello.
Welcome, Wiltshire Council calling. Right, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to just have a quick chat today. I'm going to try and share my screen now with you. Yeah, very, very briefly an introduction and a little context around these Wellbeing for the Workplace seminars that we're looking to run in partnership with our colleagues at the LEP and with Swindon Borough Council. So my name's Guy Sharp. I'm a public health specialist working for Wiltshire Council. Really excited to get these seminars up and going. So why employment matters to health? So being at good work is better for your health than being out of work. Good work is defined as having a safe and secure job with good working hours and conditions, supportive management and opportunities for training and development. So there's clear evidence that good work improves health and well-being across people's lives and protects against social exclusion. On the flip side of that, unemployment is bad for health and it's associated with an increased risk of mortality and morbidity. For many individuals, in particular those with long-term conditions such as mental health problems, musculoskeletal conditions and disabilities, health issues can be a barrier to gaining and retaining employment. The combined costs from worklessness and sickness absence amounts to around £100 billion annually in the UK. So there's a strong economic case for action. Addressing and removing health-related barriers requires collaborative work between partners from across the private, public and third sectors at both a national and local level. So moving on. Workplace health is promoting and managing the health and well-being of staff and includes managing sickness absence and presenteeism, which is those people physically being at work but being unproductive. Workplace health interventions are activities undertaken in the workplace by an employer or others to address these issues. Typical workplace health programs cover a variety of areas, including mental health and financial well-being, which we're looking to cover today. And both of those issues becoming sort of really more to the forefront because of the recent experience through the pandemic and now the cost of living issues. But they also include things like smoking cessation programs, physical activity, healthy eating, sleep, alcohol and drug misuse in the workplace, musculoskeletal health, domestic abuse as examples, and these will start to form possibly the program as it develops and areas that we'll look to cover it in the future. So well-being in the workplace is really important because on average adults spend about 1/3 of their working life at work, which means the working environment can play a huge part in our health and well-being. Good working conditions and a supportive work environment have a positive impact on health. Healthier workforces are more productive. Taking employees' health and well-being seriously reflects positively on the organisation. And preventing illness, managing it in a positive way, and helping employees to stay in work just makes good business sense. There was a recent report by Deloitte back in March 2022, which suggests that employers see a return on investment. So for £5.30 that's spent, for £1 that's invested, you get a £5.30 return. So it's never been a better time to prioritise staff mental health, especially given, you know, everything that people are going through at the moment. So moving on, I just wanted to give a bit of context to the health of the working age population nationally and what that means locally across Wiltshire. So according to the now defunct Public Health England in 2019, and I appreciate these stats are a little bit dated, but COVID has kind of messed things around a little bit. But back in 2019, around 12.8 million, that's 31% of working age people in the UK had a long-term health condition. So 1 in 4 UK employees reported having a physical health condition, and 1 in 5 of those employees with a physical health condition also reported having a mental health condition. So if we look at it across the LEP footprint, so that's both the Wiltshire and Swindon areas, the total population is 727,000 people. And when you look at the working age population, so that's defined as those aged 16 to 64, we're looking at just under 440,000 people. That's approximately 60% of the total population. So if you think that 1 in 3 of those have a health condition, that equates to just over 146,000 people. Adults experiencing a common mental health disorder, so that's 1 in 6, we'd be looking at around 73,000 individuals in Wiltshire. And then employees reporting having a musculoskeletal condition, it's just under 44,000 people. So that's a huge number of people potentially affected by these conditions, and really worthwhile just addressing that through this workplace health programme. The other thing we need to appreciate is as the population of the UK ages, there's going to be an increase in the number of people with one or more multiple long-term conditions and limiting long-term conditions. So it also means that people are likely to be working for longer. So if we can support people to stay in work and have healthy work and look after their well-being, then I think that should stand us in good stead. So I shall just move on. So this brings me to this particular programme. So one of the 5 strategic objectives of the 2020 Swindon and Wills Skills Plan was about promoting programmes to improve the physical and mental health of employees. So with this in mind, the Growth Hub have formed a partnership with ourselves, Public Health, at both Wiltshire and Swindon councils, with the aim of delivering a series of workplace health webinars, each addressing key workplace health issues, topics such as the one today. Each webinar will comprise a number of speakers, and we'll also include interactive time for networking and just those chats. Really exciting times. So quickly, I just wanted to go on around mental health and financial well-being in the workplace. So given the challenges currently faced by employers and employees, felt it important to target our first webinar on these areas today. They're kind of very different but very connected issues. So in terms of mental health, statistics provided by the Health and Safety Executive indicate that 2019 to 2020, there were 17.9 million working days lost due to common mental health disorders such as stress, depression, and anxiety. And people with mental health problems are often overrepresented in high turnover, low paid, and often part-time or temporary work. So being in good employment reduces the risk of mental health conditions such as depression. for some people, but it can also be a cause of stress. So really shining a light on mental health in the workplace is key. As I mentioned before, the impact of the pandemic is just starting to be kind of really considered, but there's so much we still yet don't understand. And we've kind of just started to emerge from that, and now we're lurching into another issue with the cost of living, which is really going to impact on people's mental health. So very much aligned to mental health is the issue of financial well-being. There are a lot of stats there, but just for example, according to Money and Mental Health, over 1.5 million people are experiencing both problem debt and mental health problems. So it's really quite an important area that we need to address. So the reason why we're here today. So fantastic speakers lined up, as Laura and Robert both mentioned. Chrissy Evans from Able Futures and Paul Fox from the Money and Pensions Service. So before I hand over to them, I just wanted to make you aware of resources that are available locally for businesses and residents as well, because a lot of residents are also employed in Wiltshire. Slightly complicated picture with it being two council areas under the left footprint, but those living in Wiltshire and working in Wiltshire, we are looking to set up some workplace health pages on the Enterprise Network website. We have health improvement coaches working within public health, as do Swindon Borough Council, as you can see there. And these guys can come in and work with businesses, and they can offer support around some of the smoking cessation. They can offer training, support around mental well-being and the like. So I would really recommend having a look at the respective council websites. And there is something called MEC Link, which I would draw your attention to. It's actually a simple signposting service to a number of health and wellbeing offers across Swindon, Wiltshire, and also Baines in this particular instance. Really would suggest you have a look through there. And the other thing to mention is, with the cost of living issues that we're facing, there are actually support pages on the respective websites for both Wiltshire and Swindon, as well as the LEP as well. I'm sure they're there to support businesses through these challenging times. So again, I would certainly urge you to have a look at those and let any employees know that those opportunities are out there. So I think that probably brings me to the end of this particular presentation. Very short and sweet, and really it's over to the main guys for their really interesting input. So both Paul and Chrissy. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those now or later on.
Excellent. Thank you, Guy, for setting the scene there. That's really good. So just to say that, we will be making the resources available for today. Just looking in the chat, there's some interesting bits here. So Ian Gardner has added that the DWP also offer a range of support, disability confident access to work, disability. Oh God, look at that! All of these are meetings came in at once. Disability confident access to work, disability employment advisors. Happy to be contacted by anyone who wants to find out more. So Ian has dropped his email address in the chat. What you can do is, if you want to have a direct catch up with someone on Hopin, you can do that. So if you go up to the top of your screen, you should see a little envelope, which if you hover over the top of it, it will say direct messages. If you click that, you'll be able to see who's been in contact with you. But if you then click where it says at the bottom, you can then search through and find the individual. So you just type in their name, and then you'll be able to set up a direct call with them if you want to. So I'm just going to say hi to Ian, and thank you for dropping that in there. And hopefully, Ian, you will get that. If you just say yes, that would be brilliant. But yeah, so you can direct message each other. Just to also say that we are recording the session today. We will anonymize any questions because obviously some of the subject can be quite difficult for people and can be quite personal. So we won't be putting out anybody's names in relation to any questions which are asked directly. So if you do have a question which you want raised, you message myself or Laura and we can raise that with you. If you've got a more general one you're happy to drop in the chat, then please do so. But I think we are probably ready now for our first speaker. Thank you, Guy, for that excellent introduction. Okay, so Paul, if you would like to request to join the stage, that would be great.
Am I? Oh,
there you are. Yeah. Thank you, Paula. We presume that was Paula doing her magic in the background.
Yeah, Paula, very much appreciated. I'm having a horrible tech week this week. And as it's our Talk Money week, which I'll touch upon, it really, the timing is just sweet as a nut. But there we go. Such is life. Rob, how long have I sort of got here before we move on to break and other bits?
So we've got as long as you really want about up to about 45 minutes.
Okay.
We've got 3 hours for the whole day for the whole session. So yeah, as long as you really want on that.
Okay, lovely. Well, thank you very much, Rob and Laura, and also Guy for the introduction. And good morning, everybody. Good morning, right across wherever you are in the region. I'm in a sunny West Dorset this morning, which makes a change from 12 hours ago when it felt like my house roof was coming in last night with whatever storm was kicking out. So it's a real pleasure to be here this morning and to support the LEP with this wellbeing event. And what I want to focus on this morning is financial wellbeing and the links with the workplace, and really to look at what employers can do and how employers can help support their employees, their colleagues with their financial well-being. And I'll give a little bit of background first about the Money and Pension Service and what we do, and then I'll expand onto that into our links with employers and some of the work that we do with employers. And I think then towards the end of the session, I'll introduce you to some of the options that you have if you would like us to support your colleagues across your particular business environment with their financial well-being. So the Money and Pension Service, for those of you who don't know who we are, is what's called an arm's length government body. We report to the Department for Work and Pensions, and we also advise the Treasury on things such as financial capability, debt advice, certain aspects around fraud and consumer protection. And really our role it's twofold. We, first of all, are here to help people have a better relationship with money and with pensions throughout their whole lives. And I'll touch in a little while on what that means. And our second role under statute is to provide the opportunity for everybody across the country, across the whole of the UK, to have access throughout their lives to independent and impartial money and pensions guidance. We all need at some point during our lives to take some financial guidance. We're not born with an inherent ability to manage money well or to talk about money. And obviously, as we move through different stages in life, we're going to have different money requirements. We're going to have different financial challenges. And depending on, a particular stage in life, you might have financial difficulties at some stage. It may well be that you've got an opportunity to save some money or do something different. You might be 5 or 10 years out from maybe retiring and starting to just think about what that retirement plan might look like. What sort of position do you want to be in by the time you come around to retirement? Overarching all of this at the moment, there is no hiding the elephant in the room, which is cost of living and everything that goes with that. I'm not really going to dive into that too much this morning because I think it's out there right across everything that you're reading on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not here to sort of talk too much about cost of living. What I want to focus on is how you as employers can help support your work colleagues to get through this particular challenging time. Now, one of the things that the Money and Pensions Service works very hard on is to try and look at opportunities to align our resources and services and content and tools that we have around financial well-being. How do we actually get those, and how do we connect those to those households across the country who actually need that financial guidance, who need that financial support? And that's probably one of our biggest challenges. And we do that in numerous ways. So I head up the organisation for the southwest of England, and right across the region at the moment, I'm working with dozens and dozens of different organisations on various different projects around financial guidance and pensions guidance. So I'll try and bring that to life a little bit somehow. I've recently been working with NHS trusts, for example, across the region, probably 13 or 14 trusts I've spoken to since the beginning of the summer. And NHS trusts were starting to approach us at the Money and Pension Service to say, look, a lot of our employees are coming to us with financial difficulties, financial queries, and they're having to make some difficult decisions. What support is available? And so in many of these cases, we've put together a financial well-being plan for them as an NHS trust, which they've been able to embed across their workplace. And that's involved various different things. For some trusts, it could be as straightforward as some good content or resource to go, for example, into staff newsletters or something like that. It may well be around pensions. We've organised 4 or 5 pensions outreach sessions where one of our pensions guidance specialists has done a virtual session with hundreds of NHS employees at a time and talked them through what various aspects of their NHS pension means, what sort of things they might want to think about if they're perhaps starting to think about retirement. What are some of the things to red flag? What are some of the warning signs that you need to be careful of if you're thinking, for example, of cashing in a pension or taking that tax-free element from a private pension? All these different sorts of things. I work with the military quite a lot at the moment as well across the southwest, and that's not just for serving personnel, it's for the veterans community as well. There is a large veterans community across our region, and quite often many veterans struggle with their finances, and there are various reasons for that. So I'm working with third sector organisations and with local authorities, again, to try and link up our resources and our support. How do we get that to those veterans and their families who are facing financial challenges? I'm going to bring this back to basics for a couple of minutes. Financial well-being. It's a relatively new phrase, financial well-being. We are all familiar with health and safety, for example, as a well-being topic. Back in 1974, Health and Safety at Work Act came in, so we all started talking about health and safety in the workplace. 10 or 15 years ago, organisations started waking up to talking about mental health and mental well-being. And many organisations, and I'm sure many of the organisations on this call this morning, have got well-developed policies and processes to support their colleagues with their mental health. And financial well-being, very simply, is an equally important part of that well-being triumvirate. So health, mental, and financial. Financial well-being is known by many different names, depending on what you read. It could be financial literacy, it might be financial wellness, confidence, financial resilience. But putting it very simply, it's about having a good relationship with money. And For us at the Money and Pension Service, it's about being able to make the most of your money from day to day. It's about being able to deal with the unexpected, and I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail in a couple of minutes. And it's about being on track for a healthier financial future. I think at the moment, given the unprecedented economic challenges and headwinds that we're facing, it's more important than it ever has been, certainly in my opinion, that people right across the region are able to access support and help around their financial well-being. People who experience better financial well-being are less stressed about money. In turn, that has very positive effects on their overall mental and physical health and on their relationships. So as employers, it's more important than ever before at the moment to support your colleagues, your customers and your communities to build financial well-being. And we can help your organization to start or to continue developing ways to do this. There's a couple of things I think worth mentioning here to put some things in context. The first is that the Money and Pension Service provides financial guidance. So we do not provide financial advice. We don't step over that boundary into regulated financial territory. And that's very important because it means that we are independent and it means that we are impartial. So we do not endorse or support any financial services products or companies. We work with the financial services sector on several pieces of work, but we don't endorse them as businesses or as products. So by financial guidance versus financial advice, simply that means if you look at it in the context of, say, savings, let's say you have an amount of money and you want to start saving, something you've not done before. You might be interested in, let's say, an ISA. So you can come to the Money and Pension Service. You can speak to us one-to-one in confidence, or you can access some of our digital services. And we can go through with you what it means to actually put into an ISA, what some of the implications of doing so are, what are some of the things to be wary of or to keep an eye out for, what are some of the tax implications, for example, those sorts of things. It's then up to you as an individual to say, okay, I'm going to go and choose an ISA. Financial advice steps over that boundary into regulated territory and would say, okay, you've got choice of ISAs A, B, or C. We recommend you take ISA B because that's best for your circumstances. So that's financial advice, and we don't cross over that boundary. For employers, I think that you play an absolutely key and vital role in the financial well-being of the people that work for you. Right across the country, we are experiencing at the moment employees and employers coming to us and other organizations as well, but coming to us and saying, can you help us? Can you support us? Because we've got people who are asking about food bank vouchers and referrals. We've got people coming to say, do we have a hardship fund as an employer? Is there anything else that you can do as an employer to support us? So I want to sort of talk to you a little bit about why it's important as an employer that you look at engaging with financial well-being, and actually what the benefits are, not only to your employees, but what the benefits are, some of the benefits are to you as an employer as well, because there is certainly benefit on both sides. There are multiple aspects to financial well-being. For our work here at MAPS, the Money and Pension Service, we have what's called the UK Strategy for Financial Wellbeing, and that runs all the way through to 2030. So we're only a couple of years into that at the moment. And we really break it down into 5 sort of key areas. And the first one of those is about receiving a meaningful financial education. Going back about 3 years when the most recent statistics were available, we know that over 5 million children across the country were not getting any form of meaningful financial education. And that's very concerning because very often it's certainly evidenced that children who do not get a good financial education very often will pick up their opinions, their thoughts, around money and around different aspects of finance from multiple other sources that might not be appropriate. And very often that can lead to them moving into adulthood and actually not being in a position or being very confident around making financial decisions that are positive for them. So that's our first aspect. We also look at the regularity of savings. And this is what I was talking about financial resilience, for example. Now, back just at the beginning of the pandemic, when we launched the UK strategy, we knew that between 11 and 12 million people across the country did not have £100 in savings to fall back on. And that's a very worrying figure. There are multiple reasons for that aren't really for today. But I think what's important to highlight is that developing some form of financial resilience for households is really one of the key aspects of building that financial resilience. And what do I mean by resilience? Well, quite simply, it's about a buffer. It's about being able to deal with some form of economic shock that comes along and affects you or affects your household. So, for example, none of us saw a pandemic coming around the corner 2.5 or so years ago, quite clearly. So we were completely unaware of the financial tidal wave that came along with that and really affected all of our households and our finances for the last couple of years. But it might equally be something on a much smaller scale. It could well be that an individual's washing machine has just exploded and it's £300 to have that repaired. It could be that your spouse or your partner, their car or van requires £600 or £700 of repairs. And if you don't have that financial buffer and you can't make that repair, is that going to impact negatively? For example, if your partner is self-employed, is that going to affect their ability to bring income into the household? So we work a lot with households and organizations to try and provide channels and opportunities to help people build up a savings habit. And I'm going to go into some specifics a little bit more nearer towards the end for employers and how you can help around that. We also work around the area of credit for everyday essentials. It's quite worrying at the moment, the number of households across the Southwest who are starting to access inappropriate, high-cost, short-term credit products because they need to access that liquidity for everyday essentials. And one of the things that concerns us is that a lot of these products are very, very accessible. They're very easy to apply for. And we want to try and work with households to help them understand the sort of decisions that they're making. For example, I was doing an interview this morning on the Radio Solent this morning, and we were talking about buy now, pay laters. And buy now, pay later is a form of credit that's just exploded in the last 2.5 years, where for at least 2 of those years, near enough, we were not able to go to the shops, physically couldn't go into them. So we all started shopping online a lot more than perhaps we used to do. And you'll see now, against pretty much every retailer online that you go onto, there is some form of credit spread. And it can be very, very easy for individuals to think, well, it's just £25 today. It's just £40 on that Sunday morning as I'm making a purchase. And those things can very quickly roll over and become problem debt if you haven't got a tight grip on that. We also work a lot around debt advice, and debt advice is something that I will touch on in a little bit more detail as well. Debt advice is free across England. We fund certain aspects of debt advice with strategic partners. It's a little bit different in the devolved nations because debt advice is a devolved government policy. So really what I'm talking about here this morning around debt is applying to England. And we expected, for example, the demand for debt advice to peak towards the end of 2021. And we were somewhat surprised when the numbers were a lot lower. We found this very strange, and we did some work to try and understand it. And we think ostensibly what happened is that there was a certain number of people who we knew were over indebted at the beginning of the pandemic. But the government very quickly brought in various support schemes, the furlough scheme, the self-employed support scheme, and various others, which were, broadly well received, I think, at the time. And those schemes were in place for, the better part of 18 months or so. And then about a year ago, those schemes were wound down, the majority of them. And we think what happened is that during that period, households that were experiencing problem debt were just keeping their head above the waterline, but they were kicking hard below the surface because they were struggling. Now, typically, somebody who's in debt will bury their head in the sands. They will look to max out their credit card, for example. They'll look to max out their overdraft facility. If they have an opportunity, they might, perhaps turn to the bank of mum and dad or a friend or a relative, various different options. And then and only then do about 1 in 3 to 1 in 4 people actually seek some form of professional debt advice. And it's very, very important that they do. And again, I'll touch on for employers what you can do to support that as an employer, but in a bit more practical terms in a few minutes' time. The last sort of major tranche of work, overarching, that we do is around planning for and in later life. And when we are the money and pension service, but we don't just deal with pensioners. That would be a misconception. We actually work very hard to encourage people to engage with pensions much earlier in their lives than many people do. I'm turned 52 a few days ago, and if I think back to the 1990s, for example, when I was in my 20s, my mid-20s, pensions were a joke. It didn't matter. They didn't mean anything. I was never ever going to be old. It was so far away in the future. But it's very, very important that people try and engage with their planning for later life as they go through their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and so on. And there's very good backing for that. And employers, again, in this particular area, you are in a prime position to support people. Many of you will have workplace pension schemes that employees are opted into. Many of you might have, depending on what sector you are, it could be that there are public sector pension schemes in place. And a lot of employees now have multiple pensions over the course of their lives. I think gone are the days where we walk into a company at the age of 18 and walk out of it at the age of 68, and we've simply had the one employer. Many of us have changed careers several times or changed organizations. So it's important that employees get the opportunity to understand about their pensions and about what their pensions options are. And again, I'll touch on this a little bit when we do something a little bit more practical. So, what are the benefits, the financial well-being benefits for businesses and employers? Well, it's a fact, it's evidence that people who enjoy good financial well-being are actually more productive at work. And if those people are not productive, you as an employer can suffer as well. We know that the most recent evidence suggests that about 1 in 10 of UK workers reported that they'd experienced a fall in productivity at some point over the preceding 3 years in the workspace, in the working environment, directly as a result of their personal financial situation. It also affects businesses because if people have better financial well-being, people aren't falling behind with their bills or their payments. That actually has an indirect impact on businesses as well, because people who have better financial well-being are more likely to spend their money sustainably, which is going to help local and regional businesses to have perhaps better profits and cash flow, and not actually writing off debts from customers who may not be able to keep up a payment plan, for example. The economy also benefits from the future focus of people who enjoy financial well-being. When people actually are in a position to set money aside for their future, that can be invested into businesses and potentially boosts, certain productive parts of the economy. And how your frontline services build financial well-being is actually very important. So that's what I'd like to focus on for sort of maybe about, you know, five or so minutes, 10 minutes before we perhaps move into some questions. So what can you actually do as an employer? Well, quite clearly, I think it's fair to say that a lot of employers have traditionally backed away from financial well-being as a support offer for employees. And there's a few reasons for that, but I think one of the main reasons has always been that employers have always been, or some employers have always been reluctant that if they provide some form of financial guidance within the working environment and a colleague accesses that guidance and perhaps makes a poor financial decision off the back of that, is that going to come back and bite the employer? Are they in some way going to be held responsible? And really the answer to that is no, they're not. So, you know, we need to be looking at things like, as an organization, do you offer your colleagues workplace pensions, which the majority of you will do? Do you have, for example, opportunities to signpost to discount schemes, for example, as part of your wider employee wellbeing strategy? Do you find any room across your workplace wellbeing environment to include how to access debt advice, for example? Debt advice, as I mentioned, is free in this country. One of the things that we are concerned about is that, left to their own devices, a lot of people are accessing inappropriate debt advice. We've just had a major result here at the Money and Pension Service with Google, for example. If you accessed Google, well, actually, if you access Google, this doesn't change until the end of this month, I'm advised on that. But if you accessed Google and, for example, put debt advice Southwest, let's just say, if you were struggling and you were seeking some form of help, typically those returns would come back and you'd see excellent organizations like Citizens Advice, like Step Change, Christians Against Poverty, regulated, excellent first-class organizations. But you would always as well see an awful lot of commercial entities who in some way, shape or form are trying to sell a customer's details onto an inappropriate debt advice journey for a fee, make a commission out of the customer, and it shouldn't happen. Debt advice is absolutely free and available in this country. So we've been lobbying Google for about 15 months to say, look, your advertising policy is steering people towards inappropriate debt advice. That is bad for their health. That is bad for their mental health. It's bad for employers, and actually it's bad for communities in the country. And eventually, after nearly a year and a half, Google have relented, and in a few weeks' time are going to ban these organizations from advertising across the Google platform, which is, it's fantastic news for consumers. It's fantastic news for people who want to seek debt advice, who know there is help available, but aren't quite sure as to the way they can approach that. Do you, for example, if you've got service users as a business, you know, do you ask if there's any way that you can help with filling in benefits forms, you know, opening letters? It may be that you've got some employees who actually struggle with the language of finance. Finance in this country is often made far too complicated. One of the things here at MAPS that we very much try and do is to lose the financial jargon. We don't want people being confused and cluttered about those key issues. And, you know, does your organization, for example, do you signpost to help and support with money, you know, towards the likes of ourselves, maybe a local credit union, perhaps pensions information or budgeting tips? All these sorts of things are within your power as an employer, and they're really not going to cost you anything at all. Certainly our services here at MAPS are absolutely free to access. They will not cost you as an employer or cost any of your employees so much as £1. We are fully funded by a levy on the financial services sector and on the pensions sector for our pensions work. So our services are absolutely free at the point of use. So as an employer, for example, the only resource that it would cost you to engage with us and have us support you and put a financial well-being plan into place is that little bit of time, that human resource in time to just embed some of our content or our resources, perhaps on your company intranet or onto company newsletters, maybe onto some of your social media channels, those sorts of things. What I do want to get the message across is this is not about you having to commercialize an offer in any way, or to put another line on your budgeting and your cash flow, because this isn't going to be the case. I've worked recently, I think, they won't mind, I'm sure, using them as an example, but I've spent some of the last year working with LV, the insurer that I'm sure many of you know, based down in Poole, and they've got about 7,000 employees across the country, alongside Allianz, which is their parent business. And we've been able to implement a really, really strong financial well-being offering for them. It's involved virtual learning sessions. It's involved pensions guidance colleagues talking to them. It's involved different events that they've held themselves, utilizing our content and our resource. And the feedback from that has been fantastic. There is nothing we can do at all to help with inflation or with interest rates or with cost of living. I truly wish that there was. But what we can do is to support you as employers of organizations right across the region to better support your colleagues and your employees with their financial well-being. One of the things that we know is that employees are looking for a lot more from employers at the moment. To a certain extent, at the moment, it's a job seekers market. There are more roles at the moment than people are to fill them. And so people who are looking for new roles, for example, who are looking for new employers to change their career or move in a different direction, they're going to be looking these days for a lot more than what the salary is and whether they get a company car. They are going to look more broadly about your holistic well-being offer to those individuals and what that might look like. Many organizations, offer free coffee and tea, perhaps fruit, various different things. There's some great stuff going on across the Southwest, but the number of organizations addressing financial well-being is probably still in the minority, and it's very much something that we want to be able to support you to develop over the coming months and years, particularly as we just don't know what the economy is going to look like in 6, 12, 24 months time, and how that's going to affect people. So what I would like to get across to you as a message, I suppose, is that if there is an opportunity as an employer, it doesn't matter what sector, whether you're public sector, private sector, third sector, it does not matter. If you're not already doing so, and perhaps you've been thinking about developing some form of financial well-being support for your people, or you're already doing so and perhaps you want to expand on that and look at doing some things differently, do please make contact with me. I head up MAPS for the whole of the Southwest. I would be absolutely delighted to have a conversation with your organizations to see what we can do. Very often, I tend to deal more with larger organizations on a one-to-one basis. And, probably that's down to resource. There is me representing MAPS in the Southwest. But for SMEs as well, it's equally as important. For micro businesses, it's equally as important. And so I work with several business networking organizations. For example, I support certain chambers of commerce. We're a member of the Southwest Business Council, so we look to support members of that organization, Business West, for example. So there's opportunities at many levels for employers to engage with us at MAPS and to help support your people. And we really would love to see you. We have a particular focus at the moment, and it's not to the detriment of other sectors, but across the country, the hospitality and the retail sectors have been particularly adversely affected, I think, over the last couple of years, not just around the pandemic and the economic shockwaves that came with that, but certain political aspects that we all talk too much about for the last 4 or 5 years, and various different things. And so those two sectors at the moment, I'm doing some specific work with in order to try and support employees at scale across those particular sectors. So if you're in the hospitality or you're in the retail sectors, then, you know, again, do please reach out to me. We'd be more than happy to have that conversation with you. So I'm conscious that I've chatted for about 40 or so minutes without letting anybody in with a question or a breather. So I'm going to take a step back. Rob and Laura, thank you very much. If anybody's got any questions or comments or criticisms or anything at all, I'm more than happy to field any question that I can.
Thank you, Paul. That was really, really interesting and useful. I think there's a lot to take away there. Yeah, especially for people thinking about businesses, not just those larger ones who may also look at their own internal support packages they might put in place for people. But I think it's really, really good for considering the SMEs who, yeah, often that is where there could be the biggest impact of someone who is suffering from financial well-being, because they may not have the security or support or the systems there, which can lead to people making some difficult decisions when they're actually in the work environment, which then impacts their output. The impact of the situation.
Yeah.
Laura, I know we've got a couple of questions. These are coming through direct chat, so we'll just raise these. You might be able to answer them. We might not be able to, but Laura, if you'd like,
I'll give it my best shot, Rob.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. That was really, really great. Me and Rob were sat here next to each other, listening intently, but you even had us sort of, oh, my financial well-being. So you had us thinking. So I'm sure you've got everyone thinking. That was really great. Thank you. Yeah. So I got a couple of questions directly as you were speaking. So I feel like a couple of them were answered as you were speaking. There was one around debt, and then you kind of covered that. So if the person that asked me if they don't feel like that was covered, they can say in the chat. But I think you did that one, and there was sort of a couple like that. But there are two that I think are really interesting questions that could be interesting for many people. One was about if you have sort of been had a couple of jobs, a few different jobs, and you've been with different employers, different pension services, how do you go about kind of consolidating that, and where do you start with that? That was one of the questions. I thought that was a really good one.
Okay, yeah, that's a really important question actually around pensions, because as I touched upon, Laura, you know, people can build up 5, 6, 7 small pension pots throughout their careers now of 40, 50 years. And it's actually very important that they do take some pensions guidance, particularly as maybe they're, let's say, over the age of 50, it's particularly important. So there's a couple of things to highlight here. The first one is that everybody over the age of 50 in this country who has any form of private pension is eligible for a free government pension-wise appointment. And I would absolutely urge people to share that with their employees and to take it up themselves. I did mine 18 months ago after I turned 50. And what that involves, it takes about an hour, and we actually run the pension-wise service. And what it does, it enables somebody to book an appointment with one of our pension-wise guys and to give them a couple of weeks. They can dig out these reams of pensions documents that we all accumulate over the years and sit down with an expert. Now, we only recruit people directly out of the pensions industry. They know their stuff. And what that pension-wise appointment will do is help to answer that sort of question. It will say, look, what are your 5 or 6 different strategic options that you've got? Let's say you're 52 like I am, and let's say you were thinking of retiring at 65 or something like that. It might be closer. What are my options? what are the main different strategic choices that I've got? What should I be thinking about at the moment? What are those things that I should be wary about at the moment? One of those, for example, is around pensions fraud. There has been an increase in pensions fraud activity over the last couple of years of the pandemic, for example. People at the age of 55, people with certain pensions can access a tax-free element from their pension pots. And more people are starting to do that because, for example, they need that cash influx now in order to try and compensate for some of the financial challenges they've currently got. But they're not realizing, or perhaps taking some guidance on, what the ramifications of that decision will be 15 or 20 years hence when they're actually retired. So it's absolutely vital to take some pensions guidance. PensionWise is an absolutely free service. It's secure, it's confidential. Brilliant. Paula, I've just seen, has put that into the chat. Thank you, Paula. So you can either do that via our website, you can book an appointment when it suits you. It really is a valuable use of an hour. If you get your annual pension statement through, Laura, like I do, it comes to like 30 or 35 pages. It's absolute drivel, the majority of it. It really just needs strimming down to about 3 pages. And it's no wonder that many people just go, oh, yeah, far too many graphs, into the drawer. And we do that. It's natural instinct. So that opportunity to take PensionWise after 50, I really would suggest people do that. For anybody else, if you're under 50, for example, or you've got, let's say, you might have a private pension, but let's say you used to work in the public sector, so you've got maybe a local authority pension as well, you can also speak to us for free and in confidence and speak to one of our pensions guidance specialists. It just won't be a PensionWise appointment. But we are here to take any question around pensions independently and impartially. So what I will actually do after this session is I will get some resources together on numerous topics that I've touched on this morning, including pensions, and I will share my details, and perhaps if you could circulate that maybe in some way to the people on the call today, that may well be of help to them. But yeah, do please come and talk to us.
Okay. Thank you for that, Paul. And I think you're completely right. I think when you get that kind of communication that just seems a bit much to really digest, and you kind of just want to avoid it. So I think the fact, you put it to the bottom of the million other things that you've got to do and all of the life admin and everything else. So I personally feel like that's such a nice option to know that there's a human being that you can talk to about your particular circumstances and just sit and have a chat with. And it's so nice for you to come on because we see you as a human being who knows all of this expertise, and it makes it a lot friendlier for us to engage
it's
with.
One of the reasons, Laura, that I really don't like using PowerPoint when I talk to different organizations, because it can be very easy to just whack up 10 slides around money guidance and financial and pensions guidance. But when you're talking about money and when you're looking to support people with money, it's important to speak their language. It's important to break these things down. Not that you're patronizing people, but we're not trying to turn people into financial advisors, but they know that there is somebody they can have a conversation with, or they can access it digitally at their own pace, and that independent, impartial support is there. So again, this is why I'm really grateful for opportunities like this to come along and speak today and point out what support there is for people.
Yeah, and we are grateful to have you. Even I feel less scared now because you're not scary. I had another question as well. I think I see any ones in that chat, but I had one whilst you were talking. And it was actually, you did cover a bit about SMEs, which are small to medium enterprises, so small businesses that could be a one-man band or sort of 3 or 4 people. And someone asked about if they were to look at taking on an employee for the first time, what would they need to do? How would they go about that? If you've got a sort of general advice about that.
Well, I think if they want to take on an employee, for me, the general rule of thumb, it's the same as if you're taking on your first employee, or if you've got 3,000 employees across your organization. All of a sudden, today you're self-employed, tomorrow you're an employer, for example. So you step over that boundary. And just as part of any induction, or as part of some sort of introduction to the company or to the organization, it's well worth just putting together just a couple of pages of resources around financial well-being, because obviously you will give them a health and safety induction, for example, and you'll outline perhaps what other support resources you might have as an employer. But I can get some stuff over that literally just to print off a couple of pages. Here's some independent, impartial support. Things are a bit tough out there at the moment. We know that. That's an understatement. We just put this together as a pack for you, and here's an organisation that can support you. If you're having some difficulties, or if you want to ask any questions. I would keep it as simple as that, Laura, at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such a good point. I think that kind of ties into like what Guy was saying earlier about sort of feeling well to be present at work as well. And you don't always know what's going on for your employees, and just for them to know where they could go to certain support might leave them feeling less sort of preoccupied whilst they're at work, and just have happier people all round at work and at home. That's what we want.
Yeah. It's absolutely true. I mean, a few years ago, before I changed career and came into the Money and Pension Service, I used to run, I was managing director of an environmental business, and we had about 120 employees at the time. And I remember an employee, she came into my office in tears one day, and she'd been made bankrupt. And I had absolutely no idea, or her management had absolutely no idea, that she'd been having problems. For the last few months, she'd been a little bit not herself in the workplace. And we didn't understand that, and we hadn't made room to understand that. Not that we were in a position to pry into her personal finances. It wasn't about that, but it was about just having an understanding that somebody in your workplace, one of your colleagues, was having some difficulties. So, it's a great opportunity for SMEs, micro businesses, just to have some basics. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just so, make employees know that there is help and support out there for them.
Okay, yeah, so thank you, Paul. Brilliant and really useful and insightful information there. It's great that we're going to be able to share this with the people on the call. And please, if you're on the call today and you get this information, share it with your colleagues, share it with other businesses which you may know as well in your own networks. It's really important that we get these messages out there. And if you need to talk to someone about the situation, obviously Paul's here as well. But if you're looking at things from a wider business perspective, please come and speak to us at the Growth Hub. We're doing a number of bits of work at the moment around providing hints and tips on the energy crisis for businesses and energy efficiency. We're also providing a support page on our website of where to go for guidance on government support and other support which might be out there relating to energy and cost of living. So we're trying to keep all of these things together. But please have a chat with us. We'll be able to signpost you in the right direction for other support.